Our subject is based upon the Bardo state. Bardo literally means that intermediate state. Bardo literally means the gap. Now, particularly relating to our own topic here, that Bardo referring to the moment when you die, and the gap between taking the next birth, or if you call it rebirth, that gap between the death and rebirth, that gap is known as Bardo. But generally speaking, Bardo could be referred to every phenomena in a sense of a long period or short period ideas. For example, in the very long period sense of the Bardo, or that intermediate stage, is from the beginningless of the copper and right present and the future, that very gap is also that Bardo. Or in other words, the moment we take birth in this lifetime until die, the gap between birth to death, that is also Bardo. Then there is a very instant Bardo, which is momentary. Whatever happens from 1 second to next second, although it's very momentary, short, but that gap is also Bardo. So Bardo could be referred to every phenomenon there is any gap. However, that our idea of Bardo here more with the intermediate state, the gap after the death to the next rebirth between that. And so that it is understood in one sense the idea of Bardo, as explained earlier, that from the moment of death to the experiences of the next rebirth, that gap between is as regarded as the Bardo, which is the literal meaning. Then there is also the ultimate meaning of the Bardo, in the sense of this very topic, teaching of the Bardo. In the ultimate meaning of Bardo is very much the middle, which expresses here of that the mind that again leaves the body, which we explained earlier, death, when it experiences death, the continuation of the mind never ceases, never stops. So therefore, the mind itself, or the nature, or ultimate nature of the mind itself is beyond existing, beyond non-existing, beyond the nihilism and beyond the eternalism idea of such. Since the mind is beyond such, as it is between, so to speak, of the eternalism, nihilism, so that betweenness was also referred in this another sense of the ultimate sense as in the case of the intermediate state, that mind is very much beyond or in between, in the middle part, so to speak, of the nihilism and eternalism, existing and non-existing idea. One of the teachings of the third Karmapa, Ranjung Doje, which you must have heard or become quite familiar in his teaching of the Mahamudra, that it explains that the nature of mind is such that one cannot say positively that it exists, because an enlightened being who has very much recognized the ultimate nature of mind, who is the omniscient one, could not pinpoint or could not find a substance, concrete, that he can pinpoint saying this is the mind. Similarly, one cannot say that the mind does not exist, therefore not having pinpointed, because the ground, the foundation of all the samsara in nirvana is the mind. And then what is mind? He explains is that it is the, again, union of such that it is between, it is above or beyond the existing and non-existing. And therefore it is very much the middle part of yes or no, existing or non-existing. As such, that in this very idea of the intermediate state of the Bardo, of the death, what we are trying to explain here is that very ultimate nature of the mind, which is in the middle path, or which is in the center, middleness of existing or non-existing, is such that in this being middle, that Bardo refers to as also that middleness, not being into the extreme of the eternalism or nihilism. So that is a basic definition of the Bardo, intermediate state, the literal term, as well as that of the ultimate sense or meaning in itself. And that Bardo is again, as explained this morning, that there are three levels of Bardo state. The first level of the Bardo state is known as the Bardo of death. Now, the explanation of the Bardo of death itself is that when our body, which was explained again earlier, that is the component, togetherness of the five elements and atom and so forth, dissolves back into nature or to the elements. So as it dissolves back into its nature, so to speak, back into each according to the elements. Now, what again in our ordinary term we call as a death. And generally, that in actual sense, that it's a dissolving of the five elements back into each of the onto nature as on its own, so to speak. Then
that
and as such, that in our general karmic air, so to speak, dissolving of the five elements, karmic air gathers into very much the central channel. And as it gathers into central channel, becomes union, one. That is the moment one experiences what we call in ordinary term of the death. But that gathering, togetherness is such that if one has the, again, opportunity, a sense, is that opportunity to experience the ultimate nature of the mind. This experience is known as, again, recognizing the ground luminosity. Luminosity, which is again very much the same, another term for the ultimate nature of the mind, which is Mahamudra. Yes. So that at that time, the essential nature of the mind, which is emptiness, sort of experienced naturally, effortlessly. At present, when we apply any practice or generally do meditation, since that everyone who experiences death at the first stage experiences that very empty nature of the mind, the whole purpose of that, like a guru or a lama, giving teachings which is known, again, commonly as introducing to the nature of mind in our life when we are not dead, and thereafter, by the virtue of our Guru who has introduced or explained to us that very nature of the emptiness of the mind, then we practice, meditate upon recognizing, experiencing such, and become familiar. And as we become familiar by the introduction or instruction of our Guru, at the moment of death or the first stage, when such experience occurs, you recognize. That is called introducing and recognizing. But as others, that's such who have not developed any familiarity to recognize, they too experiences that very ultimate nature of mind, but rather recognizing it. So therefore, if one has put effort to practice meditation according to the instruction of Guru, what he has introduced to you of the nature of mind, nature of the mind, having become familiar, and has become familiar, although you have not completely realized the nature of mind in your living state, but when you die, when you experience that very state or the first stage of the Bardo, your own practice or meditation experience matches with the experience in the Bardo state. So that matching point, again in the literal term or in the dharmic term, is used as the meeting of mother and son. It becomes one. You know what you have done is exactly, it matches to what you are experiencing at that moment or that time. As such, again, just to remind the fact that if one have not built familiarity towards that sort of meditation, and then one fails to recognize it, and by being terrified with that experience, again one passes into unconscious state. Again, that duration is again always indefinite, but 3 days and 3 days and a half, so forth. But there's no definite duration of to individual. It all depends on the individual such. So that if by the virtue of one's practice again, that if one is able to recognize, match your own practice with that very experience during the first stage of Bardo, then you are liberated and have experienced the Dhammakaya aspect of such realization. Why that state of the Bardo is regarded as the supreme state to recognize or to realize is that, first of all, it is simpler to really understand or recognize that state of the Bardo. And secondly, since one is within that very period of experience of the ultimate nature of mind, there's no mixed feeling of such. But otherwise, in again giving example of such, that in the second stage of the Bardo, that where you are able to experience the vision of such deity, there is again you have, or it is possible to have some mixed feeling. But whereas in the first stage of Bardo, there's no such, so it becomes more simpler, and as a simpler, it is the ultimate state of the Bardo. And so as such that when one is unable to recognize the nature of one's mind, which one is experiencing during the first state or stage of the Bardo, then as explained earlier, again that one passes into unconscious state. But when one comes back into the conscious state from the unconscious state, then you go to the second stage of Bardo. The second stage of Bardo is Bardo of Dhammata. Here, what you are experiencing is really the unobstructed nature and the essential quality of the 5 wisdom in the form of 5 Dhyana Buddhas. And in short, during this period of time, that you are experiencing again that of the peaceful deities and wrathful deities. And this is where the idea or the topic of the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities comes from. But again, starting with very much a peaceful deity experience, once again that all the deity that we talk about of the peaceful and wrathful does not appear out of the sky, but it is very much again a different aspect of your own mind, since the nature of mind, as we have explained earlier, is the emptiness, unobstructed nature of the mind is also, that emptiness is unobstructing. So as such, that within that unobstructed nature of the mind, one is able to experience all different aspects of such mind, which is that you are experiencing 42 peaceful deities and 56 other deities. Now, why there is such number of the 42 and 56 as such is that, again, as we have explained this morning, that we have 5 skandhas, aggregates. Then there's the 5 senses. Then there's the object that is your own quality or your own aspect of different aspect of the mind. So in short, that you experience the second stage of Bardo in that sort of form. First, having come out of the unconscious state, you experience the peaceful deities. Then, if one fails to recognize any of such, then one experiences the wrathful deities. And that whole experiencing of the peaceful and wrathful deity is the second stage of Bardo. So, when one is undergoing the second stage of the Bardo state, that again, because of our dualistic mind, that we have developed that pattern or habitual pattern, that one tends to separate such, that thinking that every experience of the peaceful and wrathful deity is separate from that of your mind. Essentially, as explained again, that all those experiences of the peaceful and wrathful deities are simply the different aspect of the clarity of the mind. Yet one again fails to recognize that if one has not become familiar with any of such a yidam or deity. And in addition to that, it is explained in the teaching that when one experiences the peaceful and wrathful deity, not only one experiences that, but there is also a luminous, a brilliant light of such. And in this idea of the wrathful, they are quite frightful, with fangs and open mouth and so forth. And with the lack of the practice and with the notion of the habitual pattern of the dualistic idea, when you have that feeling of self and other or separation, then you conclude that idea they are not the very nature of your mind or the aspect of your own mind, but someone else who has come to harm you, particularly during the stage of the wrathful deity experience. And as a result, one is unable to again liberate, become frightened from that, and again that is where one is not able to liberate. But if one recognizes any of the deity during those period of the peaceful or wrathful, then again one has the chance to liberate oneself. And if liberated, that is the Sambhogakaya aspect of the liberation. So that is the whole purpose of yidam practice. As such, you are also must be familiar that there are many different type of yidams to practice. The whole idea of the yidam practice is, of course, if one is very diligent to master the yidam practice in this lifetime. Recognize that very nature of the mind in this lifetime, of course, that is the supreme, which is the experience of the siddhi, of ordinary and the supreme siddhi. Yidam is referred as the root of all siddhi. And therefore, if one fails to perfect the yidam in this lifetime, then again, as a virtue of having become familiar with that particular deity that you have practiced, as we call as the yidam or personal deity, and by the virtue of practicing the developing stage, which is the visualization, and dissolving it into oneself, feeling inseparability of the yidam and self, you are able to recognize that very experience during the second stage of the deity and feeling that there is no separation between your experience of the deity or peaceful and wrathful deity from that of your mind. Otherwise, you separate the possibility to liberate, the chances to liberate. So that the two stages of the Bardo, the first stage and that of the second stage. The first stage, one is experiencing the very nature of the mind. And the second stage, one is experiencing the very different aspects of the mind. So therefore, just simply the nature and aspect, they are not being totally separate or different, they are the pure state of the Bardo. Both the first and the second stage are very much pure state of the Bardo, and it becomes quite essential to recognize, liberate during those two stages. And as such, again, the purpose of the empowerment that will be given tonight of the 100 and peaceful and wrathful deity is to empower you and bestow the blessing upon you so that you have the permission to practice such deity, and as a result to the empowerment, you will be able to recognize the deity in such state with the virtue of your applying such practice upon yourself. It is, in other words, introducing someone that you have not seen, so that having introduced, when you meet, you know you are introduced. The second stage of the Bardo, particularly the empowerment is, there has been some questions here by some people that what is the commitment of this empowerment? What do we have to do? There is no particular commitment this time. Nothing whatsoever. Except be here and receive the empowerment. And in addition to that, regardless who you are, we all have to experience Bardo. So therefore, the real commitment is read the Bardo, the book of which is called a Tibetan Book of Dead, the Bardo state, as often as possible again. Make yourself familiar with that rather than just turning the pages. And having become familiar with such, the real commitment is recognize the deity when you are in Bardo. Any questions?
How do these teachings apply to people who are or who belong to other faiths or who are simply disbelievers?
Regardless of what tradition, religion, or belief you come from, the Bardo experience is an unavoidable state that one always experiences such. Even if one belongs to the different belief, That possibility of the liberation is there if one has learned to cultivate the compassionate and loving aspect of such. But because there are not many who teaches or emphasizes upon very much that subject, the whole idea or reason of why it is said that you are very fortunate to meet Dharma means that Dharma teaches this individual how to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. So therefore, that if you have cultivated as such, without being if a Buddhist, then very much the good quality can be experienced in the Bardo state, but the Bardo experience will happen regardless to anyone. And also that the person, the individual who is really dying, have not become familiar with any of such idea. If you yourself are familiar, then with the aspiration and the prayer towards his liberation is also a tremendous help at this time of Bardo state. Particularly aspiring with the cultivation of bodhicitta, altruistic attitude.
It is possible that when we go to the Bardo, it's possible to recite mantra, something like that, or even the Bardo, people who born again. Is it possible to recite mantras? Yes, mantras. In the Bardo.
Why not? If you are in that state of capacity, it is also a very realized, advanced state of the mind. You are able to do such thing in there. But preferably, it is good to recognize the nature of mind.
What's the best way you can help someone if you're with them when they're dying and they're frightened and they don't believe anything is after death?
The answer is really similar to the answer that we have given to that lady. It also depends upon the individual who is experiencing the death. How you want to help or how could we be of some help is really a question of who, what sort of personality or person they are. If they are open towards everything, every sort of thing, ideas, then even if that individual, he or she is not Buddhist, if they're open, then explaining about the Bardo, reading the Bardo Tibetan Book of Death, and helping him or her to understand those experiences so that it would be a tremendous help. And also, and it is of a tremendous help because at the moment of the death, that the very consciousness or the mind becomes sometimes able to really have only one-pointed concentration if you are really speaking to that individual with the understanding or with the openness. So when he or she dies, that you have helped him or her by reading such or explaining that. But then there are others who are rather, excuse me for using this term, but rather stubborn, not open towards any other sort of tradition or any sort of thing. So for that, it's not proper to really force to make them believe, but rather from your part, the best thing you could do is really cultivate or develop loving kindness and compassion upon him or her, which is the bodhicitta, the precious bodhicitta. This bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, is really good. Even if that person is alive, he will appreciate you. And even though when the person is dead, such thing is of tremendous help. And if you are an advanced practitioner, you can do the poor practice, which is the transferring of the consciousness.
How is the luminosity of the first stage and the 5 wisdoms of the second stage, how are they the same and how are they different? So you're saying that in the second stage it's not the 5 wisdoms alone, but it's in the form of deity, and in the first stage it's luminosity?
The first stage of the Bardo, of the experience of the clarity of the mind, is really the mind's quality, experiencing. So that very quality is in the luminous form. That is the nature of mind. And to get to a further depth of the nature of mind, that it is ultimately emptiness, and the form, or it has the clarity, luminous aspect. That is the nature of mind. So because of such, that in the first stage you are simply seeing the very nature of mind, luminosity. On the second stage, the very again nature of mind, the luminosity, you're seeing it slightly different aspect, but that is also the nature of mind. This time you're seeing deities, the luminosity with deities, but in the first stage there's no deity.
So you're saying that in the second stage it's not the 5 wisdoms alone, but it's in the form of deity, and in the first stage it's luminosity?
The deities are again embodiment of the 5 wisdom. Now when we speak about the idea of yidam, experiencing the yidam at the Bardo state, you're not seeing the yidam that is painted on the tanka like that. Actual yidam, very different from what we have really seen or experienced or visualized on the tanka or the painting. But at that time it is the actual one aspect, the clarity aspect of the mind of yidam that you experience.
Okay, let me just try it one more time. So are you saying then that on the second stage the aspects are in some ways separate, 5 separate aspects, but in the first stage it's all one, united, but it's all luminosity?
Actually, when we explain about mind, and mind has 2 qualities. And the one is when you look at the nature of mind, and then this nature of mind is the emptiness or shunyata, which you cannot find. And this is one qualities of mind. And the other qualities of mind is the yet, even though it's shunyata, but still mind can understand, or it has the qualities of self-knowing. And that is we say, the luminosity or the clarity of mind. So now when the 2 different stages of Bardo, you can say first stage of Bardo is mainly you're experiencing the emptiness nature of mind. And then second stage of Bardo, and you're experiencing the clarity, mostly, clarity from the mind. So that's why these different yidams manifesting. But we use term, even the first experience of Bardo, we use that, the basic clarity or luminosity. But it doesn't mean really, but it's mostly the experience of the emptiness nature. That's why we say if you can understand that or can realize that, you can have result of the Dharmakaya state. Yeah.
In our country, a lot of people die in the hospital. And very practically speaking, What should we do with the body, and does it make any difference to the mind after death? After death. Say after a person stops breathing. Practically speaking, what should we do with the body? And does it make any difference?
Ordinarily, it really doesn't matter what you do with the body. Again, getting back into Tibet, or traditionally, that because of the tradition that when anybody dies in Tibet, immediately there are so many lamas available that the moment of death or during death there's always a lama helping, and after the death they do the transferring the consciousness, the practice of the poa. And so in the idea of the poa, that one does not do anything to the body until one has done that poa practice. But if such thing is not available, then it really doesn't matter what you do to the body. And again, if one is in the meditative posture after death, which is also a sign of having recognized the ground or basic luminosity of the mind that we have talked as a symbol or the proof of he or she having recognized that, sits in the meditative posture after the death. At that time, it is important not to move the body until he or she comes out of that state of meditation.
Regarding the nature of mind, this morning we spoke about the bond or relationship that mind makes with body when we're alive. Two things. One is, can you say something about the moment of the making of that bond, when that happens, and what is the nature of that, creating that relationship? And also, when we're alive, we talked also this morning about the brain is injured, that the mind still has its luminosity. But what is the relationship between the mind that we're aware of and the ultimate mind? Are they two separate things, or are they related? How would you describe that?
This is the ultimate mind. This is the ultimate
the relationship, bond, the beginning of such a relationship between the mind and body really begins at the moment of the conception in the mother's womb, and having taken birth or having sought the accommodation, so to speak, in the body. The moment one develops the fixation of this is my body, this is of me, that fixation, that idea, labeling that very body as mine, that is where one has sort of developed, or if you call it a bond, developed between the body and mind. And again, as we have explained, the essential nature of mind, the emptiness quality and the clarity of such a mind is always stainless. Even if someone has some brain damage. But as now they have developed that relationship in this sense is simply that mind has now developed a fixation, this is my body. So as a dependence on the body, because mind has taken it as my body, although the quality, the aspect of mind has not changed, but it has to function to the capacity of the body. So when there is a damage in the brain, having that fixation towards the mindness to the body, that mind can, because there is damage in the brain, although the ultimate mind and that very mind is no different, the quality-wise, there's no different, no damage, but it cannot function to that body. It could not function because of the fixation or that of the attachment or grasping towards mind.
I'm still puzzled by the fact that in the brain, the cells in the brain, scientists tell us, store information, images that we take in, and impressions. They're not really together. For instance, if I think of my mother standing in front of a red house. Standing in front of a red house. The red house will be stored in one part of my brain, the mother will be there. When I recall that image, it has to pull those two cells together. Now, at certain times my memory functions in excerpts. It doesn't hold the whole memory forward. So I'm capable of remembering the red house without the image of my mother. Right? So if I'm reading the Book of the Dead and I'm learning about these deities, Egon, so on, this is all connected with the electrochemical function of the brain. It's actually in the cells of the brain. So all the imagery that we're learning about Tibetan Buddhism is stored, it's consciousness, but it's stored in the brain.
Wow.
My question is, how can that possibly continue when the brain is dead?
Yes. I hope Rinpoche has understood it, because I couldn't store that in my brain. I think that the whole idea of the Buddhist view of what we call as mind or consciousness, and whole belief or idea of the scientific view, idea on the brain and so forth, must come together like the bringing, solving of a puzzle. And such thing is possible, but it may not happen immediately. So as such a nature, I have not immediate answer to your question. As that because you have a strong understanding that what you have said is true, because probably scientifically you must have done many research, and as a result of research you have come up with those ideas of as you have come up with as a result of the research, you have come up with the understanding or idea of the different part of the function of the brain and so forth. Yet, what you may not have completely understood is the complete philosophy of Buddhism on the mind itself. So therefore, as such, we cannot put that puzzle together at this very moment. But however, it seems that in a Buddhist philosophy or that teaching on the idea of the mind, that some who have realized can recollect or remember, if you like to call, of many past lives. And they are able to remember the future lives. And they do not only remember them, but give enough evidence, proof of the past and future life. And having explained about the past, what they have done, we are quite certain this person, which we call now as a realized person, who is explaining about his past life, did not bring the same brain in the present life. So therefore, that the brain that's stored isn't exactly the brain that you have to store in one's particular brain. But personally, what I feel would be extremely effective, even beneficial to people of the world, is that bringing some conclusion in the understanding of the scientific viewpoint of the brain and the Buddhist viewpoint of mind together, and bringing them together might be of a tremendous benefit to the people of world who are interested in such subject.
But actually, what I was really trying to get was, what is the difference between the consciousness that is generated by the brain and the consciousness that transmigrates? I believe in transmigration. I believe in rebirth. I myself can remember a few lives ago. So I'm not in doubt about it, but I don't understand how it can take place, because if all energy must have a source, and if the energy of my consciousness is in my brain, it's coming from the electrochemical function of the brain, my consciousness. That's the source of its energy, blah, blah, blah. What is the source of the energy of the consciousness in the Bardo? How does it exist?
Now, in the Buddhist understanding that everything is the source of the mind, even what we call as the heart, and the whole functional thing that we have on body. And so since everything is and that of the idea and thoughts are very much the source of the mind is the very much source, or in other words, what you used as your term as electro energy or so forth, the source of such is mind. But the brain, again, as I've explained, that the mind having developed that relation in the body, it has functioned. It has functioned through the brain. So the whole energy of brain that you have described with the fabulous words, which I cannot repeat even, is actually the source is the mind. So that is what Buddhists believe as the mind is the energy of everything. And all the rest, like a heart, brain, are the channels to function the mind. Personally, what you have said is very interesting to me. Particularly the idea of red hat on one side and mother on another side, and the meeting of together. I have never heard such thing until now. Really.
Kalda sendra ne shin je